Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episode 7, the final episode of FX's limited series, Under the Banner of Heaven, entitled Blood Atonement. Pretty obvious title here. We've been watching Ron and Dan work toward their Blood Atonement and finalizing their list for, I think, a couple of episodes now. So we kind of knew where this was going to head. But first of all, let me start by saying that, one, I loved this episode. I love the fact that we got an extra long episode. This ran about an hour and a half on Hulu with commercials, but they usually run about an hour or so. So we got about an extra half hour. I thought that was great. I love the fact that it was intense. It was exhilarating. It was scary, and everything kind of played out and wrapped up nicely. And I thought this was a great episode. I thought this was a well done series, a well done show. It's probably going to rank pretty highly on my best of 2022 list. I just thought they did a pretty masterful job here of like weaving suspense with the mystery, with the commentary on, I don't even want to say just Mormonism, but kind of on religion as a whole and how it impacts how we move through life. Because we have that juxtaposition of how Jeb approaches these cases and dealing with these people. And I'm not even talking about in this episode. I mean, throughout the whole season, how Jeb approaches these people in this community, like, hey, it's me, Brother Pyrie, and how he does that versus how Tapa, who is not Mormon, how he approaches interviewing suspects or talking to people. And it comes off-putting to Jeb and a lot of his peers when Tapa talks the way he talks. But then in this episode, we see Tapa actually being the voice of reason when it comes to religion. And I'll talk about that when I get to it, but I like that juxtaposition that they gave us, where it's not just condemning this fundamentalist style of Mormonism, it's condemning radicalism as it pertains to religion overall, and it also kind of condemns the idea that you can't be a moral person or a person with values, or as Jeb says in this episode, someone with a compass. I think he means that to mean a moral compass. How it's not impossible to be like that. Like, you don't need a religion or a God to guide you to be a good person. So I think there's a lot of interesting commentary on religion here and how it impacts how we move through life. And I just thought this was a great series that did a whole lot of great stuff. My only complaint, I'm just going to say it up front, is that there was a moment in this episode where they say that, I can't remember which item of evidence it was that they were looking at, but they go, this was 4 days ago, and this was the same day that Brenda got killed. It was the video from Diana rushing out of this store when she sees somebody with long hair and a beard. And I thought, it's been 4 days in real time since the murder that happened in episode 1, but the way this show jumps all over the timeline and how it uses like various devices to kind of like get you to that space. Just like in this episode alone, it uses Dan's journal. It uses what was the other thing? I'll get to it when I start talking about the episode. But like it always uses like people or objects to kind of like put you at a spot in the timeline and go, here's what happened during this time period. And that happens so much, and it's so disjointed that throughout these 7 episodes, it's very difficult to track time. And I don't like that. I don't like not knowing where I'm at, when I'm at in time, when the purpose is not to confuse me in that regard. So if you're looking at something like, something like involves time travel or something like that, that's something that's kind of meant to challenge you in that sense. So I have that eye for that. So I'm looking for that, and it doesn't bother me as much. When we're dealing with a straightforward murder story here, the way this jumps in time like that, and it uses like a third-party person to kind of give you the information, it makes it difficult to track where and when I'm at, and I didn't like that. And to find out in this episode it's only been 4 days, it's like, I thought it had been like months, because I had just no idea how to track time. And even though I know that the Laffertys with long hair would technically have been before Brenda's death, when you have the young, virtually hairless Laffertys and Brenda in same scenes in episode 1, and that's the same scene where she dies. The same episode where she dies. It makes it difficult to track time because my brain is going to be locked in with the idea that at the same time as I saw Brenda die, all the Laffertys were like really young looking. And even though I know that that was before, because it was all like, oh, here's my wife Brenda introduced to the family. I don't know how much time passed between then and when she was actually killed. And I don't know how much time was, well, I didn't find out till now, how much time was passed between when she killed and when they ultimately end up finding the Laffertys. And the long hair as a symbol of time progression, it just tricks my brain into thinking like a whole bunch of time has passed, when really a whole bunch of time passed between when we first see Brenda meeting the Laffertys and when she dies. There is where all the time passes, but we only see that in bits and pieces through different episodes, so it's just hard to place it. So that's like my only complaint about the show, is I felt like if they had told it in a more linear fashion, it might have been a little bit easier to grasp time, or even something simple like put a month and year on the screen, January 2017, something like that, because it was a little bit difficult to follow time-wise. But I'm going to talk about this episode in two sections, because this episode really revolves around two different things: the hunt for Ron and Dan, and Jeb's kind of crisis of faith. So I'm going to start with talking about Ron and Dan, and we pick up where we left off with Tapa at Oneis' place. We hear a story from Oneis about how Ron sent Robin to go... I'm sorry, Ron didn't send Robin to go bet on horses. God sent Robin to go bet on horses because they just need the money to strengthen their church, right? And I love Oneis is in the background like, well, I don't know if that's what God would want. But after he does this, and I like how Robin goes, okay, yeah, I'll go. And he's like, of course you will. Like, okay, all right, God, sorry. He then kind of like leans in hard on Matilda, like, okay, who else might have been involved in this so I can add them to my list. And she's like, you know, the Lowe's helped, I think she said pay, the Toe, I don't even know who the other person, Toes, or whatever, helped them pack the house. I don't even know who that is. There's been... Side note, that's another small problem with this show, and I think it's just a byproduct of dealing with Mormonism, where families tend to be larger. There's just too many people in here for me to remember all these people. The Laffertys are a massive, like 6 brothers, then they got wives, then they all got kids, and then you got the priests and whatnot, and then you got these side bishops and all these. There's just too many people, man. Like, it was hard for me to keep track. But he says, is there anyone else? And she basically, after a little bit of pressing, confirms that Brenda essentially helped them plan it all. So that's it. He's got his removal list all prepared now. And I love how he made it sound like the list was from God, because he's like, Oneis is like, who was on this list? He's like, I don't know, man. You look at it. You tell me. This shit just spilled out. I'll look at it. I might not even be done yet. I have no idea. like this shit is such a fucking joke, man. Like, and it makes me wonder, and I wonder this if you watch my videos for We Own This City, which aired on HBO, I posed a question of whether or not the main character in that show is somebody who just lied, and just a pathological lie, like I'm just a lying motherfucker, or if he was such a sociopath that he actually believed he was not guilty of what he was doing. And now I wonder the same thing about Ron, because that scene was so ridiculous that it made me wonder is Ron lying knowingly, like, or does he really believe that God spoke through him? And I don't think he does, but like, it was just so convincing that it was not convincing at all. I'm sorry. It was not convincing, but it just made me kind of like tie the two characters together and just made me wonder if maybe Ron is actually knee deep in this bullshit. But like I said before, it's all very on the surface that this is all revolving around sex and the ability to fuck as many women as you want, and whatever kind of mental gymnastics they got to do to make God okay with it. That's what they're doing. But we'll get into that later. So we find out Robin lost all the money that he was supposed to use betting on different horses. And I got to say, Oneis says that he bet on different horses. And I wondered in that moment if, when he said different horses, if he meant that Robin lost the money betting on the horses that Ron told him to bet on, but that they must have been different horses from what God wanted. Kind of like, like essentially kind of poking fun at the idea that God would tell him to bet on horses. Like, oh, God told you to bet on horses and you didn't win. I guess it was some different horses he bet on. You know, something like that. But then Robin later apologized. We see Robin later apologize to Ron for betting on different horses. So that kind of took away from it for me. I was hoping it was going to be what I said. And and that Oneis was kind of being a dick about it, but I guess he really did bet on different horses. But after Oneis' snide remark about that, it made me wonder. It made me wonder if Ron was gonna be like, "Lo unto me, God just told me to add your bitch ass to this list." I really put that in my notes. I'm like, "Oh, he about to add Oneis to the list." You have too smart of a mouth, says God. I'm sorry, I'm really poking fun, but I mean, it's so ridiculous, and I don't even think it is meant to be taken seriously, but it shouldn't be. Like, we give these people this level of acceptance, like, oh, well, let me hear what you have to say. Like, we take this kind of shit seriously. It's just gonna feel like this shit deserves to be ridiculed. Like, when we wrap this kind of shit up in this country, we'll be a lot better off. Like, this kind of stuff shouldn't be allowed to, we shouldn't be giving credence to this kind of behavior is what I'm getting at. So, like, yes, I'm poking fun, but at the same time, this kind of bullshit deserves to be poked fun at, because it's we gotta eliminate this kind of shit in this country. But we gotta eliminate this kind of shit in life, to be real. But so let's see, where was I? Oh, I love poking fun at this shit though. So Oneis reveals that Ron got a letter from his son in Florida, and that clued him in to that Diana and the kids might be there. So that, of course, then clues Jeb in that they might be there. And Jeb calls Florida. Like, man, I don't know, man. I love this episode, and I'm just in a good mood, so I don't know why. I guess that's why I'm being goofy. Jeb did not call Florida. Like, can I speak to Florida, please? He calls, I guess, this place where Diana was staying at, and then he calls, I guess, the maybe like the local sheriff in that town, and essentially says that if he could convince the manager to let them in, that they could go in as a wellness check and not need a warrant, which I thought was actually pretty wise. But in that, I love it. A slight little moment in that call that I thought was great. And Jeb's like, yes, thank you, ma'am, or something like that. And she goes, detective. And he apologizes profusely for this. And I like that, because that kind of shows like there's still that little bit of misogyny bleeding out into the phone through Jeb. Like, he doesn't want this anymore. He's not bought into this shit anymore, but it's so ingrained in him that it still slipped out. And I think what we're supposed to take from that is if he was talking to a man on the phone, he just said detective. But since he was talking to a woman, he said ma'am, and she corrected him to detective. And he felt so bad about it because he's so not into this shit anymore that he didn't even mean it. It's just like that's how he's just been trained to talk to women, that he didn't give her the respect of that title. Just how who was it that just got the PhD? I think it was Jill Biden or something like that. Just got a PhD or something. And somebody tweeted, I think I saw a tweet that says, stop calling her Dr. Biden. It's like, bitch, she got a PhD. She earned it. Like, what do you mean stop calling her that? And it's like, it's just like this ingrained kind of mentality of like, women don't deserve these titles of respect. And so like, I obviously I pulled a lot from that one line, but I do think that's what that we were meant to take away from that. And that's why Jeb was apologizing so profusely, because he didn't mean that. He doesn't want to come off that like that anymore. But he leaves, and Jacob Lafferty, who we have not seen in a while, he's the one who was kind of weird. He comes in, and he's all bearded up too, and he looks like he has a bomb. But it turns out it's just Dan's journal, right? It was Dan's journal, right? Yeah. And then Dan's journal kind of becomes the next item that we use to kind of be like almost like this third party not narrator, but third party information giver. A lot of the time it's been Alan or various people that he's interviewed. Sometimes it's items like letters or whatever. And then in this case, it ends up being Dan's journal, who is not a person, that we get more information out of, which we get more information out of. So Jeb used the journal to figure out that Dan threatened Brenda at their home, and he just walked in. He just sitting at the table drinking milk, like shit's sweet. He's drinking milk, and he essentially threatens her to say, tell Alan to come back to his brothers, and tell Diana, her kids, to come back to Ron. And she even says, like, are you threatening me? And he goes, no, it's not a threat. But if you obey, we'll be okay. I'm like, well, that sounds like a threat to me. Like, he says, if you obey, you'll be forgiven. I'm like, that sounds like a threat, because the natural conclusion of that sentence is that if you don't obey, you won't be forgiven. So, yeah, sounds like a threat to me, buddy. And Jeb said it was written like Dan was writing a new Book of Mormon. That's why I did the whole thing low and because these guys keep pretending like God is talking through them, and it's so serious, but it's so ridiculous. And I of course, this is something in hindsight that you could look at. Oh, this happened 40 years ago. I don't know. It wasn't that long ago, but we'll say 35 years ago, whatever, that this happened. And back then, it probably felt like a lot more. Maybe there was a lot more credibility to this, but now in 2022, and even for myself in the past way longer than that, all this shit seems ridiculous to me. So the show is trying to paint it as ludicrous, and to me, it was been ludicrous, so now it's just funny. So that's why I'm like poking fun, but I'm gonna chill, I swear. So Jeb learns from the journal that they then decided to go to Reno to look for like more converts for their little prophet school or whatever. They meet this Sandy chick who presumably gave them a place to stay. And then this is where they meet the people we heard about last week. Remember I was saying like it's crazy that they're still introducing new characters in the second to last episode. And that's exactly what they do here. We then now meet Ricky and Chip, who are Ricky Knapp and Chip Carnes. And these are now like, this is who I was talking about at the beginning where I said, there was like third-party things that we learned information from. First, it was the journal. And then it was also, I think for the rest of the episode, it was Ricky and Chip. But Ron's car is spotted at Chip's brother's place. They go there, and that's where they find Ricky and Chip. And they give them pretty much everything else they need to find Ron and Dan from that point on. They say Ron and Dan aren't there, and that they stole the car because they was just like they just couldn't handle it. He said something like, "Yeah, Dan was cool at first, but he was way into too much church shit." And I'm like, I don't know if I can rock with this. And then the murder happened, and they were like, "Yeah, I think we just wanted to get high, and I don't know what I think they just wanted to, engage in some good old fashioned polygamy. I don't know, but." Once it started to get to murders, they bailed out. And there's a great line about, I think it's from Ricky, and he's like, there was so much blood that you could smell the iron in it. That is such a vivid picture, and I love that line, because if you think about, you cut your finger, and you taste it, and you could taste that iron in it, the idea of there being so much blood that you could smell that taste is wow, that's a great fucking line. I love that line. So on the day of Brenda's murder, first they go to Robin's house. And I like this scene because I don't know why this happened, because what I tied it to is not how it played out. But they go to Robin's house. Robin apologizes for losing the money for betting on different horses, which shot my Oneis talking shit theory into the mud. And Ron kisses him on the mouth like Michael kissed Fredo in Godfather 2. And immediately I was like, oh, that's a cool reference. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, though. He didn't kill Robin. Like, Robin's still alive. So, because Robin's been questioned throughout the show. So, I don't know why they had Ron do that. I felt that it was meant to tie the two things together, but I guess not. But they go to Alan's house. Brenda's there, but she's in the backyard. She doesn't hear the knocking, but she hears the phone ring. She comes in. She talks to Alan on the phone. And then she goes to the mailbox and retrieves a letter from Diana. Meanwhile, they drive off thinking that Brenda's not home, and Ron is just like having a complete temper tantrum. And Dan basically says, maybe you were only meant to lead us this far, and maybe it's me that needs to do the dirty deed. So he busts a U-turn right in the middle of the street. They go back to Brenda's house, knock on the door. Brenda answers. They break in, and what we know happened. There's an interesting moment where there's a neighbor that comes up, and I wondered if this was going to play out, because I don't know what the purpose of showing the neighbor walking up at the same time as Ron was, unless that neighbor was somehow going to play a part in catching them. But I mean, the show's over and we didn't get any reference to that neighbor, I don't think. Maybe that neighbor is mentioned earlier in an episode and it was so long ago I don't remember. And maybe I meant to go, if I had binge watched it or something, maybe I'd be like, oh, that's the neighbor that they referenced in episode 1 who helped them find it. I don't know. But it happens, and they come out drenched in blood, and it is not a pleasant sight. So they missed their next 2 targets. We know that they went to the Lowe's house and they weren't there because he was out fishing. It's interesting, like how this show really was well written, to the point of things falling in place out of order. Like the whole thing with Bishop Lowe. In that episode, at that time, we were meant to believe that they might have killed Bishop Lowe and just taken him off or whatever. They go up there, they search the house, they can't find him. Clearly someone's been there. Bishop Lowe ends up being found just fishing, just like he said he was. And then now we arrive here at episode 7, and we realize just really how how real that shit would have been if he had been home. And yeah, that was pretty cool. So after they miss their next 2 targets, Dan decides they should chill apparently until they have enough money to fund the rest of their murders, which I don't know why you need a substantial amount of money to kill people. Maybe the money is for like gas, lodgings, and motels, stuff like that. But they go to Reno to try to recoup the money that Robin lost to the horses. I can't get over the horse shit. I don't know why. So Jeb realizes that one of them must die in order for them to, before they can leave Reno. He talks about this idea of again, we've heard it a million times, the one mighty and strong, there can only be one. There's been a whole history of guys who've tried to prove that that's them. So he says they gotta still be there because if they're either one of them is in a morgue or they are still there, and no one's in a morgue. So they obviously they called. I'm not saying no one's in a morgue. They made the calls, found out there was only like one person, like a woman, who was in a morgue. They head back to the casino. They're looking at the security cameras, and they see Sandy hand something to someone who appears to possibly be Dan. We see her go back and forth to that area a lot. They established there are no cameras in that area. So I don't know why they didn't even go there originally, but for whatever reason, they didn't go there at that time, but now they go there. They lock down the casino, and they find Dan and Ron in this like custodian bathroom, fighting it out. Ron, I like that Ron was saying that, you know, he did say, I just got a vision that said I gotta kill your ass. So it could be just me getting all the glory. Like, so fucking, I don't know why I'm making it sound like it's like telepathic either. Like he's a psychic. I really don't give a fuck about any of this shit. But I loved how Ron said that, you know, I'm not gonna let you see your blood because you're not gonna go to heaven because you're such a I forgot what he called, hypocrite or heretic. I think it was heretic, something to that effect. And then when he starts choking him, you see Dan just start hitting himself in the face. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? And then it comes like you come to understand that he was making sure that he did see his own blood before he died. And I'm like, wow, what a devout believer this guy is, right? But Dan didn't die. Jeb comes in. They're both arrested. Before I start talking about Jeb, I want to say I did a little research real quick. I didn't want to do too much, but I did find out that they were both sentenced. Ron was sentenced to life. Ron was sentenced to life. Dan was sentenced to Dan was sentenced to life. Ron was sentenced to death. And Dan is still currently in prison. And Ron requested death by firing squad, but then died of natural causes before he could be executed, which I believe that I think what I said was in 2019 he died of natural causes, so fairly recently. So, and Dan is alive and still in prison right now. So now I want to talk about Jeb's crisis of faith a little bit before I wrap this up, because it's already been a little while. But this episode opens up with Jeb sleeping on the couch, and I thought that was an interesting way to open this episode given the conversation that happened in his car with his wife over that book at the end of the last episode. And it made me wonder if he was so shook at the conversation with his wife and the idea of losing his wife that he didn't even feel comfortable going to bed, that he chose to sleep on the couch, as opposed to like her making him sleep on the couch. Like, you sleep on the couch so you figure out your testimony. Like, I don't think that's what it was, because when he goes to tell her that he's leaving, she looks up at him almost kind of surprised, like, well, you never came and got me, we went to bed or nothing like that. So, yeah, I wonder if that's what what we were meant to take from that. But either way, I find that interesting that he ended up sleeping on the couch after that conversation in that car. So his wife, after he finds out that Diana's in Florida, a cop comes into his office and is like, hey, your wife's on the phone. He's like, tell her I'll call her back. And Tapa makes a face like, since when do you brush your wife off like that? And he says, she wants me to give this testimony on Sunday at church. And he's like, well, you got a problem with public speaking? And he's like, only when I don't believe what I have to say. And then he says that if they note any doubt in his testimony, that he'll be single by the fall. And I thought that was so interesting that it's very clear that once he left the house, he figured there was a strong likelihood that his wife would not be there when he returned. And that kind of plays out throughout this episode, I think, anyway. But the idea that I felt like he was trying to avoid having to give this testimony, and he knows that if he doesn't give this testimony, his wife's probably going to leave him. So that was like very early in the episode, and I think a start to where this was going as far as his dynamic with his wife. So later, that same piece of shit priest comes by, the one that we've seen before. Again, I apologize for not knowing his official title or the role that he plays in the church. I'm sorry. Like I said, too many names, too many titles, titles that I'm unfamiliar with since I'm unfamiliar with the religion. But that same piece of shit priest comes by. And he immediately comes in and again dabbles a little bit of casual racism, like Salt Bae, on the whole situation. Like, man, ever since we let black folks up in here, it's been a problem. And he says what I've been saying the whole time, like this whole show, essentially, that they and Alan says it too, that they would essentially rather see Brenda and Erica's deaths go unanswered rather than bring bad publicity on the church, which is just, that's the crux of what the problem here is, right? Like, you have people who are brainwashed by the church. Then you have people who are actively doing the brainwashing. And the people who are actively doing the brainwashing have a vested interest in making sure that they maintain the status quo, that the men stay in charge and the women stay subservient. And the idea of just like, that they don't want this kind of death to be associated with their church, so they would discourage Jeb from like, hey, just don't tie it to us. Like he has some sort of moral obligation. Like he cares about who killed this woman and this child. He doesn't care about how that's going to reflect on the murderer's religious group. Like, why the fuck would you care about that? And just the idea that these people would rather have these deaths go unanswered or uninvestigated or unsolved or whatever the case may be to help maintain their status of power is disgusting. And it's what we see, it's what we're seeing in politics right now. Politicians, and I'm not talking about Republicans and Democrats, I'm talking about both. All the public politicians would rather see poor people stay poor, kids dying at schools, all of these sorts of things. They'd rather see these things happen than to get voted out of office. So they'll continue to kowtow to whatever, whoever's donating the most money to them, whatever group of constituents they think will vote for them. They'll continue to stroke those people's egos at the detriment of everyone. Everybody else could fucking die. They don't give a fuck as long as they can stay in office. And that's what we see right here with these, with this priest and this religion. They need to maintain their power. They need to maintain their ability to fuck as many women as they want and say that God's okay with it. Whatever kind of mental gymnastics they got to do to justify being horrific and reprehensible people in order to stay in power, they will do it. And that is why, like, I hate this shit as a whole, but like that scene just really stuck with me because I'm just like, man, these guys will do anything to keep power. And that idea resonates even still today. It's disgusting. So he says that he doesn't say that he'd rather the deaths go unanswered, but he says he doesn't want to bring a poor image on the church over speculation. And I love how Tapa says that they're past speculation, because I'm like, speculation? Way past speculation, bro. And then Alan cuts into the guy as well. And then the priest tells Jeb to tell Alan to mind his tongue. Jeb says nothing, and the guy just turns around and leaves. And he like wipes his shoe or like his pant cuff or something like that. And Alan essentially says that means that he's condemned them both. But right before he leaves, he tells this story. He doesn't fully tell a story, but he talks to Bill about how his Paiute people and the Mormon people worked together and fought together. And Taba laughs and was like, yeah, I heard a different story, a version of that story, which we will later hear. So after he leaves, Jeb's wife, we later see Jeb's wife giving him a hard time about him questioning his faith. She's like, I married a man of faith, and and that's how I want to raise my kids, and that's what's gonna happen with or without you. Like a total, like she's completely brainwashed, this woman. Like really, I'm in the and she said that she's talking to that scumbag priest. I'm like, oh my God. Like I'm sitting here in my notes like she does not deserve Jeb. Like this woman is terrible. But at the same time, you feel a way because she thinks she has the moral high ground. And in her mind, the goal is to get to heaven, and this is how you do it. All consequences be damned. But it's such a brainwashing that you are willing to throw away something that's real in favor of something that may or may not be real. Like she firmly believes, obviously, that all of this shit is legit. But at the end of the day, that's just a belief. Jeb is a real person right there in front of her who's been married to her for however long, who has raised these kids with her for however long, who's been a great father and husband for however long. And she goes, oh, you don't believe in the same Jesus as me? Fuck out of here. Like, you throw that away because not even because he didn't even, like, throw away the whole thing. He just like, yeah, I'm struggling. I'm struggling was enough for her to be like, I guess I got to find a new man. Like, what a terrible woman. I'm sorry. Like, man, she's a piece of shit. Like, I did not want Jeb to be, I'm like, good, go. I'm like, if you could leave the kids, that'd be great. But she doesn't deserve him. So Jeb and Tapa head to Reno after talking to Ricky and Chip, and they find Ron's suitcase and the razor blades that he wanted consecrated to do these murders within the suitcase. But these weren't the murder weapons. They said they tossed the murder weapon out the window, which was a long blade. So Jeb, in one of two scenes that show me that Jeb fully doesn't get it yet, he basically insinuates that Ricky and Chip lied because they were atheists. And Tapa, correctly reads him about this. Like, how are you going to chastise them? How are you going to distrust them for being atheists when they have no reason to lie? And the fact that the suitcase is already here is a clue that they were telling the truth. But you want to throw out their information because they were atheists and you can't find your answer quick enough. Meanwhile, it's your whole lying ass religion is the reason we're here in the first place. Everything that this religion is built on is lies, like all of it. So like you want to sit here and say that these atheists must be lying because they're atheists, but your people who are all devout believers, their entire power structure rests on a foundation of bullshit. So why don't you get your shit together? And then he finds the fucking knife. I'm like, you probably would have stabbed him with that shit, man. Like, what the fuck, man? Oh, man, where was I? So in this conversation, Tapa tells him the story, the version of the story that he heard, which, long story short, essentially revolves around the Mormon people attacked and massacred these Gentiles for no reason. They wanted to lay the blame at the feet of the Paiute people, so they dressed up like them. The guy goes down there and is like, yeah, I got to end with the chief. You see they back there waiting to fuck you up. I got to end, give up your weapons. I'll walk you through. Everything will be smooth. They do that, and then they massacre the people, the women, the children, everything. A complete and total slaughter. And again, built on lies. I rest my case. So basically he says, you got to trust what you see, the facts and the reality, or you're going to trust your people who have been built, everything has been built on these lies, and they're responsible for everything that happened in the first place. And I think this dovetails nicely with a later scene where Jeb, who still hasn't learned, says that he wonders how Tapa gets by without a compass, with, like I said, a moral compass at the top of the video. And he echoes sentiments that I feel when that question is raised. What I think Jeb was trying to get at is how do you go through life without, like a moral compass, like from God, like the idea of God navigating you through life. And I have always felt that you shouldn't need a religion to tell you what's right or what's wrong. You know inherently what's right and what's wrong. You just know. Like that's built into who we are. You don't need any deity to tell you how to navigate life as it pertains to being right or wrong. People who are doing wrong shit, unless they have something chemically wrong with them, they know they're doing wrong shit. And he says, like, all you need to do is go with your gut. And I like how he actually literally hits him in the gut and then tells him to breathe. And that's how Jeb comes up with the whole idea of one of them needing to escape Nevada, which I talked about earlier. So like I said, that I ran down how they ended up catching Ron and Dan, and then after that, Jeb goes home. And I thought it was interesting. Before Jeb goes home, he's like, oh, I need to go to Salt Lake City, or I need to go to Miami or whatever. And he's like, Tapa's like, already taken care of. Blah, blah. Well, I need to go tell Al. I already told Alan, everything's smooth. And like, to me, that read as Jeb was trying to avoid going home because he expected his family to not be there. Or he didn't want to have to deal with that conversation again. Like, oh, I got to go in here and talk about this shit again. But he goes home. His family's there. They all hug. His wife has stayed. She hasn't left. Which, like I said, I think he was expecting them to not be there. They hug it out. And he does pray. And I think that is indicative of how religion should be approached. And what I'm about to say, I'm not saying that you should pick and choose which parts of it you obey, because that's the hypocrisy that I see in religion. But I think you shouldn't be beholden to every single aspect, and you should let your own conscience and your own moral compass come into play at times too. Like, if you're in a situation, like he could still be of faith, even of this faith, and not subscribe to being misogynistic or having multiple wives. And I think he's finding that nuance and that balance between knowing that certain aspects of the religion, whether it's extremists now or fundamentalists from the past, how you can still have faith and still be kind and right and morally good, but not believe in that kind of stuff too, and still have your own faith. So I think that's kind of where he found that balance, and I like that for him. He was clearly distraught, but at the same time, it's like, it shouldn't be too difficult to let go of the really shitty aspects of that religion. And I think that's probably what you guys who have watched these videos, who are either former Mormons, current Mormons, whatever, I feel like that's probably how you live now. Like, you look at the stuff that the people did in this show, and you're like, that's not even, I don't need to subscribe to that to believe in this religion. I can say, okay, that shit was wrong. I'm not going to subscribe to that. I don't need to be out here with my foot on the neck of my wife to keep her subservient. I can live a happy, normal life and still subscribe to the good aspects of this religion. And I think that's where Jeb landed. I think that's probably where his wife landed. So that's a good ending for them, assuming that's how it actually ended. And that's not just a nice little bow to wrap on this series. But he goes out with his mom. They're looking at scenery, and she says it's a miracle, and he says the miracle is there with her in that moment and not necessarily the scenery, and she readily agrees. And I think that's a great ending to this show, to this episode, to this finale, this season, whatever you want to call it. So this is probably my longest video ever, but I think it's this episode and this show was worth giving this much time and attention. I had to get these jokes off about betting on the horses and shit and cursing on Oneis. I got to get the jokes off. One other thing that I didn't like, though, before I wrap up. Sam running into Diana and Matilda at that gas station was so fucking random that I hope that happened in real life. Like, that was documented in the case. Like, we was randomly getting gas and Sam Lafferty was there. Like, that has to have happened in real life, because that was such a random thing to happen. But I did like in that scene how Diana tore into everyone there and how they should be ashamed of themselves and all that. I thought that was a great scene. So, I'm done here, wrapping this one up. It's been fun. This show is going to end up in my top 10 for sure at the end of the year. Loved it. Hope you guys enjoyed these videos. And until next time, peace.